In today's video, I will share with you 10 camera buying tips that will ensure that you save time, money, and get the camera that's right for you. Let me begin with a very quick story. Not long ago, I was in a camera shop waiting to be served, and I couldn't help but overhear a conversation between a lady that's just come in to buy her first camera and the salesman who was giving her, at best, what I thought was very questionable advice. So a lady comes in and she says, I've been using my phone for years, I want to take more photos of my kids, of just daily life, and I'm looking for a camera to do so, specifically her first camera. There's only two things she clearly said. Number one, she likes that kind of background blur look that you get with a faster lens. And number two, her kids are just the main reason she's buying the camera, so they'll be running around, she wants something fairly quick to keep up with them. The camera salesman then basically said, okay, well, you need a Canon R6, and a 24-70 f2.8 top of the line zoom lens, because that way you'll get the background blur that you want and you'll have a quick enough camera to keep up with your kids. Now, if you don't know, that's like £4 worth of camera gear, and I was genuinely shocked as to why on earth he was selling someone £4 worth of camera gear for effectively taking family photos. But thankfully she kind of raised her eyebrows and thought, wait, something's a bit off here, and walked away. So my first bit of advice is don't entirely rely on the advice of someone who makes their living by selling you a camera. Do your due diligence first and go in with at least some information as to what you want and what you're looking for. This is where you have YouTube, blogs, camera reviews, unbiased reviews. Spend as much time reading and learning about it as you can, and that way when you do ask a camera salesman for his or her opinion, then at least you'll have a bit more of a background and information, so you don't get the wool pulled over your eyes in terms of buying something that you perhaps don't need. YouTube is a fantastic source of information, but just like with my previous point, be a bit more careful about who you're getting that information from. Now, in terms of photography YouTubers, typically they're split into two categories. The first are gear focused and the second are photography focused. Both have their pros and cons. The people who look at the gear side, the more techie YouTubers, they will know every camera feature inside out. They will tell you exactly what setting to use to get the best autofocus, to get da-da-da-da. They know all of that inside out. However, they might not have the real world photography experience to back up some of their advice. Now, when you look at photography YouTubers who are mainly photographers, then they might gloss over a lot of the specific niche details of a camera, but they will give you a much better holistic view of what that camera is like to use in the real world and have a solid body of work to back it up. For example, a gear reviewer might tell you that the autofocus system in an X-T5 is significantly better than the X-T3, so the upgrade is a no-brainer because on paper the difference is huge. However, someone who actually does photography and have used both cameras, for example, like myself, I can tell you that for 90% of people, 90% of the time, the difference is just not significant enough to warrant an upgrade if you're on a budget. So unless you're in that niche group of people who need the best autofocus, that upgrade just might not be as amazing as you think. Whereas going back to the tech and the gear reviewer, then objectively the upgrade is worth it. So listen to both groups of people because you will get different opinions, and then you can use both of those opinions to form your own opinion. With all that said, there is one group of people whose opinion I would personally avoid, and that's camera ambassadors, because I know it's not going to sound great, but camera ambassadors are basically glorified salespeople, because at the end of the day, they're being sponsored or paid by the brand to promote that brand. And what I've come across in my experience is that if a camera has certain issues or certain features which are not very good or certain bugs, then those ambassadors will usually gloss over the negativity and promote the positive of that camera, which obviously makes sense because you're an ambassador, but it doesn't really provide the most neutral perspective. Oh, and finally, if the camera that you're considering buying has been out for a while, try to prioritize longer term reviews rather than short term reviews. So whenever you see people say, oh, I've been using this camera for the last 2 weeks and this is my opinion, I'd typically avoid those. Instead, look at people who've been using that camera for 6 months, for a year, because in my experience, I've always had an opinion about a camera or a particular feature of that camera change over the course of a year. So something that I thought was incredible on week 1, I wasn't as excited about in week, I don't know, 50, for example. It's very easy to get caught up in megapixels, AI autofocus, and all sorts of gimmicky features. But when you're looking for a camera, the number one priority is what's this camera like to use, what it will be like to live with. So for example, what's the camera like to hold in your hand? How many customizable buttons does it have? Can you set it up how you would like to shoot? Does it have IBIS? So if you have shaky hands after too much coffee, or if you're doing longer exposures, it makes your life a little bit easier. Is it weather sealed? Because now it means you can shoot in the rain, in the dust, and in more challenging environments where sometimes you'll actually get the best photos. What's the battery life like? Do you now need to go and buy 10 spare batteries, or 1 or 2 spares is more than enough? Can you tilt the screen around? How does the screen tilt? Is that how you like it to tilt? You see, these little things are what you'll be using every single day and your kind of touch points for the camera. By having an extra 10 megapixels, you're not really going to notice any difference. However, when you have a camera that you can customize exactly how you want, that lasts all day in a single charge, that's weather sealed, you will have a much better shooting experience than having, an extra 10 megapixels, as I've said, or slightly better autofocus. Because the reality is, most cameras by all the main brands from the last 5 years will have great autofocus and great image quality. It's the little details that will make your experience either good or frustrating. If the camera that you're looking to get is a fixed system, like an X100V for example, then by all means ignore this section. However, if you're buying a camera that has an interchangeable lens system with multiple lenses, then I would suggest looking at the entire lens lineup and just seeing how much choice there is, both in terms of the original manufacturer and even better with third-party lenses, because usually they're a little bit cheaper and they can offer focal ranges outside of what the manufacturer one typically can. And the reason for it is because if you invest into a system, but the lens lineup is very small without any real room to grow, then you might get to a stage where you need to change systems in order to get a lens that you would want for something later down the line. If you decide to, let's say, take up wildlife photography, you have a 600mm lens that you can buy or borrow. Or maybe you want to do architecture and you want to go ultra wide, you have an ultra wide that you can use. That way you have room to grow and room to experiment within the ecosystem. And in my opinion, once you've kind of picked a good ecosystem, it does pay to stay within it, because then you will learn it inside out and you will save more money in the long term. Whilst on the topic of lenses, may I suggest not sleeping on the kit lens, because people tend to have this assumption that kit lenses are cheap, nasty, and it's just something that comes with a camera, you take it off straight away, you use it for the first week and you get a proper lens. Well, in many cases, kit lenses are actually really good. For example, the Fujifilm 18-55 kit, in many cases is preferred to the more expensive 16-55, with the image quality not being that much different. Also, when you buy it bundled with the camera, you can save a lot of money on that lens. So much money, in fact, that if you do decide to sell that lens later down the line, you will probably recover the extra you would have had to spend for the kit versus for the body only. Obviously, if you already have a lens lineup, then you don't need the kit, fine. But if this is your first camera or your first, let's say, push into that particular ecosystem and brand, then I would definitely suggest getting the kit lens, at least to get you going, and keeping it as a backup for future as well. The next thing to look at is whether that particular camera brand or that particular model of cameras has a thriving community and a strong support system. So what I mean by that is, are there frequent firmware updates coming out for the cameras and for the lenses? Because if they are, it's a good thing. It means that that is still relevant. They're working on that brand, on that camera line, and any bugs that you might have right now could have a chance of being fixed in the future. If there's a large community around this product, so Fujifilm, Leica, good examples of that, then if you do run into any issues, there's a lot of help and a lot of information. Also, there's a lot of tips and a lot of advice, so you can get the most out of that. Again, a great example is the Fujifilm recipes. I'm sure there are tons of forums around it, and if you're just starting out in that system, you'll have so much material to get going with. Another thing is some camera manufacturers release roadmaps of future products. Again, Fujifilm I think does it, and again it's a reassuring sign that what you're sort of investing into is going to be around for a while. I've made a whole video dedicated to this particular topic, however for the purpose of this one I will keep it very brief. There's a difference between having a budget for your camera and a budget for your photography. If you have £2,000 in total, spending it all on a camera might not be the best thing to do, because then you have no money left over for actual photography. My advice in that case would be to spend maybe half or even a bit less on the camera and spend the rest of the money on actual photography, on putting yourself in front of interesting things to photograph. But more in that video that I've linked down below. You don't always need to buy the latest model. Sure, the Fujifilm X-T5 is a bit better than the X-T4. The X-T4 is a bit better than the X-T3, but does that mean that if you have an X-T3 in this hand and an X-T5 in that hand, you have a clear, like, night and day difference to the point where one camera is worthless and the other one is everything that you need? Obviously, it doesn't work like that. For most people, as I've mentioned earlier in the video, the X-T3, which is now a few years old, is going to do 90% of what they need from a camera. Of course, there will still be a group of people that would like to have the latest and greatest, that would like to have a brand new camera, however don't want to spend the full retail price. So my advice is to look out for cashback offers. For example, Fujifilm does them a couple of times a year, I think Sony does them as well. Now whenever I bought something new, I've never paid retail because I took advantage of those cashback offers. I think over the years I've saved over £1,000 on a lot of my gear. Another method is to see in which other country could you buy the same product but for less. So for example, if you're from the UK, you know you have to pay 20% VAT on whatever product that you buy. However, if you go and buy the same camera, let's say in Dubai, you'll pay no VAT. Well, you'll pay 5 at the store, but then you can claim it back at the airport. And straight away, that's a significant saving. Now, couple that with various other savings and deals that you'll get over there, couple that with any currency rate exchange fluctuations, you could be in a position where you could save quite a lot of money. And if you're buying a camera, a few lenses maybe, then you could be saving a few £100 and certainly enough money to pay for a little holiday in, let's say, Dubai, whilst you're there saving money on the camera. The final tip is to sleep on it. Now sure, if you have some crazy good deal that you've never seen before, you're legitimately going to save a lot of money and it ends tomorrow, okay, that's a separate discussion. But in most cases, give yourself 3-4 days, ideally a week, to sleep on that decision and sleep on that purchase, because people are irrational and people are impulsive. So when you see something like, oh my God, I need it, I need it, I need it, when you give yourself time, you usually think of a more suitable financial purchasing decision, or maybe you do realize that you actually need it and then you buy it without any remorse. Speaking of remorse, I bring this up because I was reading, there was a survey, right? And they said that something like 1/3 of online purchasers regretted their purchase within like 10 minutes of clicking buy. So yeah, don't be one of those in that statistic, and just give yourself a few days to sleep on any major financial purchase that you want to make. All right, that's all for this video. Thank you ever so much for watching. Before I go, I want to ask you a question. Is there anything that you would add to this list? Is there any advice that you would give someone who is new to photography, who wants to buy their first, maybe their second camera, and is looking for some general advice? So if you have something that I've not already mentioned, please use the comment section and share it with everyone else. Equally, if you agree or don't agree with something that I've mentioned in this video, please use the comment section for that as well. Other than that, that's it. Have a good week, have a good weekend. Thanks again for all your support, and I'll see you soon. Bye.
Now it's time for a quick shout out to this video's sponsor, Squarespace. They gave me a platform to make my own online portfolio so I can share my photos outside of social media. Squarespace also allowed me to give my photos context by turning them into written blogs. This allowed me to elevate the quality of my work, rank in search, and provide others with value. If you always wanted your own corner of the internet, may I recommend using Squarespace as your tool of choice. If this is something that interests you, click on the link below for a free trial and then 10% off your first purchase. Thank you to you for watching this bit of the video, and thank you to Squarespace for sponsoring.